everybody. Hey, all the Substack people. I am Steve Hofstetter, and I'm here with my new friend, Elizabeth Booker Houston.
Hello.
How are you, Elizabeth?
I'm good. I'm in my car because I was leaving work and the traffic is so horrible in the DC area now because of everybody being ordered to return to office. So, I live like 10 minutes from my office and I've been driving for 25 minutes and I'm still not home. So, I was like, I'm just going to stop in this park because I need to do this live.
Well, I appreciate your dedication to it. And that is definitely an aspect of the everybody return to work that people don't talk about enough. The idea of like, hey, you're going to be more productive because we're stealing an hour of your life for commuting every
Yeah,
day.
and the thing is, they don't have the capacity for everybody to go to work Monday to Friday every single day because the Telework Agreement Act was passed in 2010. So during the first 4 years that Trump was president, while he's doing this whole big thing about telework, he had us for 4 years teleworking 50% of the time.
Yeah.
Like, no issues. I worked under him. I was one of the presidential management fellows under his administration. I mean, it's all just smoke and mirrors to make up this whole idea of fraud, waste, and abuse. Because I'm like, my guy, you were literally the president for 4 years, and you had us work from home 50% of the time because you didn't have enough space, enough buildings. It saved money. Like, it was cost effective. It went with the statute passed in 2010. So, every time I see people talk about it, I feel like people in their minds think, oh, federal employees have been working from home like that because of COVID. It's like, no, this was something that was long before COVID and put in place purposely to save taxpayers money.
Yeah, and
So,
and there are plenty of people who are not good at their job unless they're being overseen, and there are also people who are much better at their job if they can do it on their own. And
yeah.
it is wild to see people as kind of a one size fits all, and it also shows us that this whole like Doge thing is absolute garbage because if you wanted efficiency, you would find a way to not have to pay for office stat or office space and equipment and all this other stuff. But I want to let's introduce everybody to each other because I think Substack is sending stuff out to my subscribers and to your subscribers.
Yeah.
I really wanted to talk to you on this because even though this is the first one I'm doing of these where it's someone that I don't really know yet, and I know of you. I've known of you for a while because you're someone who does stand up, but is also like would I say that your main job is in political circles? Like it is you very much have a foot in each door.
Yeah, I think, yeah, my main job is privacy lawyer. Which is so funny because it's like, yeah. And then the second main job is like political commentary and the political space. And then there's the stand-up comedy in there. So
Yeah.
it's like three jobs.
Which is a combination of three jobs that everybody is used to. That is such a common combination. It is something that like it's really enjoyable for me to see, because I've certainly gotten involved with a lot of progressive creators, but I've gotten involved coming at it from I was in stand up and I was, a political comedian and personally progressive, but I wasn't officially an activist. I was just, talking a lot of shit. And it's interesting to me because there are a lot of people who are officially activists who are funny, who are creative, who, have become creators, but it is rare that someone from that world is also doing stand up as an art form.
Yeah, I feel like there's so few of us, and your journey sounds very similar to like Alex Perlman, who is Promania 500, who I've become friends with over the last
Yeah.
couple years, and like, yeah, there's not. That's so interesting that you say that because I thought going into stand up comedy, which I'd always wanted to do my whole life,
Yeah.
and I always did comedic kind of stuff and performy stuff, but um, it, anyway, when I finally decided to do stand up, I was like, oh, but my thing is political comedy. It's going to be so oversaturated. I'm in DC. And funny enough, there's actually not a ton of political comedians in DC. So whenever there's like a political comedy show, it's like me and the same like four people who get booked for it.
Yeah. By the way, shout out to I just saw Kasim Reed joined. So hello.
Hey!
Another creator I'm familiar with. So yeah, it is something that, like, all the time I get comments from people be like, "Keep the politics out of stand up," and I'm like, "Name one of the comedy greats who wasn't political." Like,
Right.
name a comedy great who wasn't political. And the only one I can think of is someone I would not emulate at all, which is Bill Cosby. So, like, the idea of when you look at Lenny Bruce and George Carlin and Richard Pryor and Joan Rivers and Dick Gregory and just the history of anyone that someone who follows comedy history would put on their Mount Rushmore, they were all political. And there are so many people who seem to be like huge Carlin fans, and yet they are right wing MAGA maniacs. And I'm just like, oh,
Yeah.
you didn't understand what he was saying at all.
Not at all, because that I've noticed that too. And I'm just like, "Oh, were we watching the same comedian? Were we watching I don't think y'all understood what was going on there." And I'm wondering if it's just they just liked watching a white guy, like, be loud. Maybe that was the thing.
Well, yeah, and Carlin definitely went after like the industry of politics. You know, he went
Mhm.
after the idea of so much of this is bullshit, which it is, but also they just see that and they go, see, he's saying the left is bullshit. It's like, no, 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 no. That's not what he is saying. And if you look at his values, he was absolutely progressive and not even just progressive for his time, he was ahead of his time. And you also see that with Bill Hicks. Like, Bill Hicks, my all time favorite. If you look at Bill Hicks's stuff that he was doing, like, I I started listening to Bill Hicks when I was a kid. But once I started doing stand up full time, this was, just after 9/11. This was, Bush's war in Iraq.
Mhm.
And so much of what Hicks was doing about the Gulf War stood up. And it is so rare that a current events joke continues to work 10 to 15 years later.
It's crazy. I actually think it's so funny because I was literally just thinking about that, about an evergreen political joke, and I think about Chris Rock in his Never Scared special. It might have
Yeah.
been Never Scared to Kill the Messenger. I might be mixing up, but I was definitely a kid when it came out, definitely too young to be watching it. And he talked about we don't need gun control, we need bullet control. Like,
Yeah.
imagine you might think for a minute before you shoot somebody. I laugh about that, but also the stand-up joke he told, which I think was Never Scared, when he was talking about Barack Obama, and he was like, "We got a black dude running," and he was like, "And he's in your face with the blackness. His name's not like Michael, and it's Barack Obama," and he was like talking about like um the whole politics of like a black person running for president, and I'm like,
Yeah.
that's crazy. That at the time he told that joke, and then Obama winning and everything else going on, probably thought, okay, the same kind of racism will die down in the next couple decades. And it's like, actually, no, man, the commentary you were making back then about a black person running for president still, unfortunately, is very accurate today. So, yeah.
Yeah. And one of his jokes on Tambourine was which I think was I think that's his latest, but
Yeah.
he recorded that while during the first Trump administration, and he had a joke on it about how Bush gave us Obama. Like, the backlash against Bush is how he got Obama. So he's happy that Trump's in office because what's that going to give us? And I loved that joke. I loved the idea
Great.
because I was watching the midterms and seeing so many more people politically active. And,
Yep.
look, I've always been politically active, but I couldn't name, more than five Congress people, and now I know most of their names. And that is something that I did not choose to do. That is something that has been thrust upon us for, having to pay attention to the world that we are. And so I was watching that being like, yeah, that's really exciting. And then I saw the consensus forming around Biden, and I was like, oh, that's not who Chris Rock meant. That's not who he
Yeah,
meant
that's
at
not
all.
that's not who he meant. But now we're in
Yeah.
another Trump administration.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, yeah, if we get to vote again, it's
Yeah.
gonna be great.
It's it'll be a good time if and when that happens. Yeah, it's so funny when you say that about like not knowing multiple Congress people, because one thing that I've enjoyed being in this space as someone who has been involved in politics since the age of 9, which
Yeah,
trips people out when I say that, but I'm like, at 9 years old I was watching the C-SPAN uh hearings in Congress about insurance, and by 14 I was like in Nashville trying to advocate for Medicaid expansion. I'm a dork.
that's
Politics are my
amazing.
thing. Politics are my thing and have been for a long time, and the comedy kind of ties into there. But I just used to come home all the time and watch the Kings of Comedy tape on VHS when VHS was a thing, and in my VCR, and rewind it and come home from school and watch it again. Way too young to be watching that. Way too young to be watching anything Bernie Mac was saying. Don't care. Love Bernie Mac.
Yeah,
Um,
one of the best of
and
all time.
Oh my god, yes. And so just kind of tying these worlds together and figuring out how to talk to people and make things entertaining so people cared, because I remember you talk about like the Iraq war. I was 12. Let's see. I was 11 when 9/11 happened, and then I was 12 that first year going into the war on terror. And I remember in sixth grade, they had everybody make posters. And again, I'm in the South,
Yeah.
I'm in Tennessee, right? Make posters that say, bring our troops home. And it was supposed to be supportive, like, bring them home, woo. And everyone drew like the patriotic stuff. And I drew one that was dead brown angel children in heaven. And it said, bring our troops home. And the teachers pulled me aside and said, your poster can't be in the parade. We're not
Whoa.
putting that in there because it's too political. And I was like, you're literally talking about war. But that was 12-year-old Elizabeth. So like 35-year-old Elizabeth is on a whole other level. Um, but it's always been a thing. And so long story short, what's so fun for me is this super nerdy thing that I've been obsessed with for so long and talking about is suddenly popular. Political content creation, and people are like, we want to do sponsored posts. We want to collab with you. We want to bring you to do this and do that. And I'm like, wow, because I was trying to tell people for the longest, like the day that I realized that comedy and politics work together was the day that I first saw Jon Stewart. I was like,
Yeah.
that's it. That's what I'm trying to go after right there. Um, and glad that Jon Stewart is still around doing his thing, because yeah, I just the Daily Show. I was like, that's what I'm going for, people. That's
Yeah.
and I knew this kind of like comedy and political crossover existed, and now we're seeing it more than ever, and not just on like one show, but what you post on your platforms, what I'm posting on my platform, but all these other political comedians are posting on our platforms, and so it's just everywhere, and I love it. It makes me happy.
So I absolutely love that. And so I'm about 10 years older than you. And so I was 9/11 was my 22nd birthday. And but I have been an outspoken political person before I was a comedian. I've been outspokenly progressively political since I was in middle school. And now as I have grown older and learned more, and there are things that that I believe in now that I didn't used to believe in, because society moves forward and that's how it works. But I remember I was 5 years old when Geraldine Ferraro was the vice presidential candidate. And that was like a holiday in my household,
Mm.
because that's who my mother was. I mean, my mother raised me that way. I come from a mixed family, etc. And so whenever someone, it's funny that you said since you were 9, because literally whenever someone says like, "Oh, I liked your comedy before you were political," my response is always, "I have been outspokenly progressively political since middle school. Did you like me better when I was 9?" And for that audience, probably yes. But fun little aside, John Stewart story. So I've gotten to meet him once, and I was at a Knicks game, and I got to go. Madison Square Garden has this. I say celebrity program, and I say celebrity because I'm in it also. But most of the people who are in it are very famous, and then I get to go too. So
You're also very
before
famous, though, even though you don't think you are. You are.
I appreciate that, but if you see who else is in the room, I am absolutely the least famous person in that room. So, I for the Ranger games I can hold my own, but the Knicks games is something else. So, uh, there's like a dining room that we all get to kind of eat in before the game, and John Stewart was there, and I was like, I've gotta. This is one of the reasons I'm a political comedian. This is He's one of the people who showed that, like, because he took a show that was, the Daily Show when Craig Hilborn was hosting it was just kind of mean. Like
Yeah.
it wasn't all that funny. It wasn't political. It was just kind of mean. And Jon Stewart took that show and completely made it his own, which is so
Mhm.
inspiring to so many creators, especially someone who's politically progressive. And a friend of mine was a producer on the show, so I went over and I used that as my an of like, "Hi, I'm Steve Hofstetter. You probably don't know who I am, but you know my friend and blah blah blah." So I was talking to him for a little bit, and he was there. He was there with his son, and at the time, I was living in LA, and he was like, "Why'd you move to LA? If you're from here, you're a Knicks fan. Like, why'd you leave?" And I was like, "Well, for me, it was really the weather." I was like, "It is." I always knew that it was warmer during the winter, but what I didn't know is that it's more moderate during the summer. Like the summers are nicer also. And he goes, "They're what?" And I was like, "How do you not? You're in entertainment. Have you not been in LA in the summer? You didn't know they were nicer?" And he's like, I didn't. What, you gonna tell me this in front of my kid? Now he's gonna make me move." It was absolutely wonderful and one of my favorite memories. And I know that it's totally off topic, but I figured the viewers might appreciate that story. Which, by the way, shout out to everybody who's joining. There's the comments are going a mile a minute. We cannot keep up.
Yeah.
But there's
But I
yeah. So
appreciate the story too, by the way. I love that.
thank you. Thank you. Yeah, and there's a lot of hate for him now from people who are saying that I saw a thread the other day that was like, "Oh, Jon Stewart coming back to the Daily Show robbed us of young talent." It's like, no, Jon Stewart coming back saved the Daily Show. He only hosts once a week, and we still get to see people elevated. We would have only gotten to see one host elevated, but instead, we get to see people like Roy Wood and Dulce Sloan and Michael Costa and
Oh,
and some really incredible talent get a larger platform
amazing.
because of the fact that he lends his name to it once a week. So yeah. Anyway, question for you: what do you think is the biggest challenge when it comes to kind of going back and forth between these strata?
Oh gosh. That's a loaded question.
Okay, it doesn't have to be the
Uh,
biggest. What is a challenge that you experience going back and forth between these strata?
I have a really hard time as someone who has such deeply rooted politic with interacting with people whose politic did not develop until they got on the internet, likely around COVID.
Yeah.
It's very hard for me to navigate and have patience for because there are people older than myself, even grown people, who don't have a deeply rooted ideology and they don't have those roots and they kind of sway with the wind. And then you end up with all this drama
Yeah.
that just because I e- developing your ideology in real time in front of people for public consumption
Yeah.
on the internet for the first time too. There's so many people, and I'm sure you've come across them too, who are in their 30s, 40s, 50s, people online who are like, I never really thought about politics in this way. And then they want to get froggy on your stuff is very frustrating to me because I'm like, you just figured this out yesterday, and I'm gonna need you
Yeah.
to take like 5 seconds and take a breath. I've also just like because of how the election went, I have so little patience with a particular group, and I talk about them constantly, and it is the white dudes on the left. The white dudes on the left irk my soul, and I'm just like, but not you, Steve.
I
You know
know.
what I'm
I
talking
know.
about. You
I'm
know what I'm
frustrated with a
talking
lot of
about.
them too. I know what you
You know
mean.
what I'm talking about.
We can
Yeah,
be
and I'm
we
just
can yeah, we can be specific without naming names. Like there is first of all, there are grifters in everything. There are absolutely grifters on the left as well.
oh yeah.
There are also the people who think that Jarrett Berenstein put it really, really well. Speaking of white dudes on the left, Jarrett Berenstein put it really, really well when he said the people who do oh, I've got to vote my conscience, so I'm voting third party. It's like, well, congratulations on your first week of poli sci, but the rest of us have thought this through. Like the rest of us have thought about results. And the thing I say it a lot, but I'll say it again. It frustrates me so much that people expect political candidates to be like a spouse. No. You are not looking for the one. They are public transportation, political candidates. Their job is to get you from point A to point B. They are a city bus. And there has never been a time where I've boarded a city bus and been like, I like everything about this. No, it fucking sucks, but it's better than walking in the rain. And those are our options. And there are so many people who think that because a candidate doesn't reflect 100% of their ideology, they are somehow evil. And look, I, before the election, before the 2020 election, during the primaries, what did we have? We had like 23 candidates in the
Yeah.
primaries. I ranked Biden as like my 17th choice.
Yeah.
But once he came out of that primary, however shady backdoor dealing that bullshit was,
Yeah.
I would have crawled over glass to vote for him
Yep.
because I understand results and we need to be results oriented. It is not about process, it is about results.
That is such a perfect description of it. And the other part of it is how little people know about how anything works.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just the folks on the right. I made a post one day months ago, it was probably this time last year, and I was like, Dunning Kruger exists on the left. It exists
Yeah.
across the spectrum. That pissed people off. But I was like, y'all aren't that smart. You're not that smart. You use slightly bigger words than the people on the right, but you're actually not that smart. And you don't really know how some of the stuff works. So the way that people would come to my comments and talk about different things, especially when it came to the Supreme Court. And they were just so confident in, oh, Biden can pack the court. I'm like, that requires an act of Congress. And then
Yeah.
breaking down the last time it happened and, how that exactly works and what it means to pack the court. And people still every single day coming to my comments, people on the left going, Biden can just pack the court. I'm like, oh my God, no, he can't. Like, that's not
You mean
that's not how anything works.
he
Yeah.
can't just wish?
No, I know, right? You can't just whoop, that's it. And I know that people are now talking about says my device is overheating. Let me get it out of the sun. Okay. My bad,
It's
phone.
because of
Excuse
this
me.
fire commentary, Elizabeth. That's
I
what's happening.
know. Let me get the AC on my phone. But no, the issue is people don't know how a lot of this stuff works. And again, it's also people on the left and trying to explain that, but people want like a quick and dirty answer. And I think that goes with the politicians too. They want everything perfect and easy, and it's not, it's very complicated. And now the response I'm getting that I have to combat is, well, obviously they could do whatever they want because look at Trump with all the executive orders. And I'm like, did you want a president or a dictator?
Yeah.
Because you can't, that doesn't make any sense. And also he's losing in court a ton, like losing so bad in court. This is not sustainable. But now people who are regretting, and I think trying to reconcile.
Oh, I just lost you. I don't know if I'm still on and Elizabeth isn't. But we lost her. I think her phone did overheat. So hopefully she can join us again. But for those who are still here, we lost her completely. All right, we're gonna have to probably end this early and on such a good rant. Also, I'm still on. I can take some comments and questions from people. And hopefully Elizabeth is able to join us again. I think her phone sitting in the DC sun got a little bit too much, but thanks to those of you who are here. I very much see what she is saying, and I I had a family member who was a Bush Republican, not a Trump Republican, but a Bush Republican, and during the 2008 election, she was saying how she wished Bush could run again. And I was like, well, you don't believe in term limits? And she said, not when it's my guy. And I think that that is a huge problem. And that's not just on the right, it's also on the left. The idea of, I believe in breaking norms. I don't believe in breaking laws. I think that holding on to norms because it's respectful and it's tradition, that is bullshit. We are way past that. But the idea of trying to sidestep laws in a way that is fascism, it's just fascism in a different form. Oh, Christy said she's back. Okay. So says she joined. Hold on, let me see if I can invite her. Um How do you invite? There we go. All right, getting her. We're getting her back. I vamped for enough that she was able to rejoin. Elizabeth, your phone got too hot.
Gave up. My phone was like tapping out. Conversation too spicy, too much, too much.
Yeah,
They're not ready.
absolutely. Well, to go back to one of the things that we were saying, one of the things that can frustrate me about the left is this purity test that everybody has to pass. And if you don't agree with one thing, then suddenly you're not one of us anymore. And we need a bigger tent. We need to be able to talk to people who disagree with us on one issue instead of pushing them to the right. And that is something that unfortunately we do way too much of.
So much of. And I had a lot of people very critical because I went to support Cory Booker during his marathon speech. And about this time last year, I was making a video cussing him out because I was pissed about the way he was voting when it came to Palestine. And so people were like, oh, but you went and supported him. And I was like, yeah, I did. Yeah, because he did a good thing. And also, what people don't want to discuss a lot of times on the left is that a tenet of white supremacy is throwing people away.
Yeah.
Like, people is irredeemable. So yeah, I just was surprised by folks' reaction. Like, I can be critical of him and also recognize, like, we need him to do good things to help us. And he did a good thing.
Yeah,
A
I
great thing.
can't I can't stand a couple of the decisions that Harris made as a prosecutor. And we might be losing you again. It says connection unstable. Oh no. Like, I can't stand a few of those decisions. And that is why I wasn't supporting her during the primary in 2020. But overall, I think she's great. I think there needs to be a bit of a reckoning where she goes, I made some huge mistakes because I thought I was following the law and I put some people away who should not be away. And I need to do what I can to reverse that because some of them are still in prison. And that sucks. But I can say that and still go, but I really like a lot of her other policies. Just because she wasn't my top choice in 2020 doesn't mean I wasn't very excited when she replaced Biden as the nominee. And I hate I know hate's a strong word, but I mean it. I hate the people who argue about, like, you talk about people who don't know how things work, who say, oh, she was never elected to be elected. And it's like, yes, she was. We elected her as vice president. We knew full well that when a president steps aside, and not only that, but delegates don't even have to follow what what the primaries say or even what the voting says. There's a thing called a faithless elector where delegates don't actually have to follow that. Those are the rules. And if you have a problem with the rules, okay, protest the rules, but don't protest the person.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I've also, it keeps resurging. And especially just in a position as a Black woman, there has been a lot of the Bernie Bros, man. They just resurge every few years, and they're just always there. And they talk about how the primary was stolen from him with Hillary. I'm like, no, he actually wasn't very popular in the South. And this is where the elitism on the left comes in. A lot of white folks, West Coast, Northern, East Coast, and I'm like, you're missing all of the South. You're missing Black people, which the majority of Black Americans live in the South. You're missing the fact that a lot of Black people don't roll with Bernie like that. And and then the responses I get are, well, he was one of the OG civil rights people. I'm like, a white man is never going to be one of the OG civil rights people. He might be an ally, okay?
Yeah,
But my
he's
goodness.
yeah, he's
And
been on the
that's
right
that
he's
he's
been
been
on
on
the
the
right
right
side of
side of
history
history in
for
so
a
many
very long
ways.
time. Yeah.
But as far as like the way he's elevated to this godlike status always surprises me to the point of people not wanting to acknowledge that he straight up lost the primary. And he admitted, he said, I lost the primary, vote for Hillary. Like, Bernie said that. But I made a video recently because people are talking about the Bernie rallies of trying to flip red states and red districts, and I said, hey, this is great, as he should. But the way that the posts were coming out were like, no Democrat is doing this. And I'm like, there's an entire 61 Black congressional caucus members who are like, what? Because Stacey Abrams exists.
Yes.
She flipped Georgia.
Yeah.
This is a playbook that Black folks have been using. Also, you guys keep seeing the 92% talking about being tired and being done. This is not helping. It's great, and you can uplift everything he and AOC are doing without diminishing the work of Black Americans. And the number of folks who got so mad and were just like, "You don't understand. He fought for civil rights harder than any of the Congressional Black Caucus, and he was in politics before the Congressional Black Caucus." And I'm like, well, that's because out of the over 12,000 members of Congress in the history of the United States, 192 have been Black. So kind of hard for the Congressional Black Caucus to exist when they didn't let Black people in Congress.
Yeah, when 50 years ago it was just one tan guy. But so a couple things on that. Like one, I do think that Bernie would have, if a bunch of people hadn't all dropped out on the same day, I do think Bernie would have won the primary in 2020.
Mhm.
However, I don't think he would have won the election. I like Bernie Sanders a lot. I
I
like his
do too. I would
ideals
have
a
voted
lot.
for him. Would have climbed over glass to vote for him too.
Yep. He he has not gotten a lot done because one of the things that he's missing is his ability to compromise with others, which part of politics is that. It is to be able to not reach across the aisle, but reach in your aisle. I think that's very important as well. Um, but also the people who piss me off the most, and quick note, I saw W. Sullivan in the chat had said we don't elect the VP. We absolutely do because we elect a presidential ticket, which includes the VP. But um, the Bernie Bros that went from Bernie Sanders to Gary Johnson, I was like, you have no idea what you are talking about because Gary Johnson was a libertarian. Libertarian is the furthest end of the political spectrum away from a democratic socialist. If you believed in anything that Bernie was saying, you are against all things libertarian. And
Oh yeah.
so the people who did that were only doing it to be contrarian. It reminded me of when I was a senior in high school, there was like this wave of people dyeing their hair like bright yellow, like not blonde, but like, like yellow, yellow. And I was curious, and I wish that like this was a time where people were creating content so I could have actually filmed this. I wish we had camera phones then. But I went around just curious and I kind of interviewed a bunch of them and I asked them all, what made you decide to do this? And every single one of them, to a person, said a variation of, I wanted to be different. And I was like, you are being different in the same exact way as everyone else. You are not being different. And if you want to be counterculture, that's fine. If you want to stir the pot a little, that's fine. But doing something just to do something a little bit different accomplishes nothing. And it certainly accomplishes nothing when you are voting against your own best interests.
Fully agree. And I actually talked about being contrarian. I made a post one time that said, are you critical or are you just contrarian?"
Yeah.
And folks were like, that needs to be on a t-shirt, because that's how so much of it feels with politics, of like, you just want to shake something up or be different. I also think there's something to be said too for simplicity. A lot of people are, so cognitive dissonance, that was a conversation came up. Mind you, I got a psych degree, okay? Basic enough to understand cognitive dissonance. But I'm like, this didn't make sense. Folks were like, how are you going to vote the way that you're voting based on the fact that you spoke out, for example, for Palestine? And I was like, because harm reduction is what I believe in, and that's a core tenet of my ideology is harm reduction. And as you said,
Yeah.
getting results, getting on the bus, right out of the rain. And I had folks say, oh, well, that's cognitive dissonance. And I was like, oh, no, I fully am aware of what my tax dollars do. That every time I pay my taxes, innocent people get bombed. That's been happening for a long time. I fully understand that everyone I voted for is a warmonger because the job description in the Constitution for the president is to be a warmonger. Commander in Chief of the United States military is the first and most important job duty of the president, not only to be commander in chief of the largest, most lethal military in the world, but to go to war when someone else tells you because Congress declares war, right? That requires a level of depravity that you have to have within you, no matter who's running for president, whether it's Bernie, whether it's Jill Stein, whether it's Barack Obama, Hillary, whoever. They are all signing up to be warmongers. That is the job description. Like, that is what you're applying for, no matter what they say to you. And that requires a level of disconnect, which is also why I would never run for president. And I never even want to be a member of Congress, because there are mandatory funds that have to go to the military industrial complex. And that doesn't align with me at this point in time of what I feel comfortable doing, right? Knowing that I would be feeding into that in that way. And I
Yeah.
was like, I have no cognitive dissonance. I am fully aware of everything that I am taking a part in. Cognitive dissonance is telling yourself that if I pick an unpopular choice that has no chance of winning, or if I don't vote at all, I have voted against something and I'm doing something. That's actually what the cognitive dissonance is. You're
Yeah.
tricking yourself in thinking. And the way I described it was like the quote from The Devil Wears Prada, where she talks about the cerulean sweater, if you've ever seen that scene. And she says, you think that you've made a choice that has exempted you from everything in this room, but really you've selected something that was curated for you by the people standing here from a pile of stuff. That's
Yeah.
exactly what they're doing. I'm like, you think in your mind that you have exempted yourself from the military industrial complex or the depravity of the United States of America or any of this, when really you just couldn't make a hard decision, and you're trying to trick yourself into something that it's not. And I don't know if it's because, again, I was 12 years old, like protesting babies getting blown up in the Middle East,
Yeah.
but like I feel like I've always had that understanding of what my decisions are doing, and that, yeah, there are negative consequences, unintended consequences, and until a lot of Americans, quite frankly, grow up and
Yeah.
learn how to confront things like an adult and to confront hard things and make hard decisions, we're going to keep getting in this endless cycle where people think that they are making a moral choice that's not really a choice for anything.
Yeah, and I mean, the trolley park problem has never been on as great a display as it was in this past election.
Yeah.
But I had, in I think it was probably 2008 or 2009, I had the chance to have lunch with Michael Badnarik, who was the libertarian presidential candidate in 2004. We had the same publisher. We both had a bit of a disdain for that publisher, and so we were at a book event. We ended up getting lunch together. We were talking politics, and at one point he said, "Steve, with your political positions, it doesn't make sense to me that you're not a libertarian." And uh, I said, "Well, I don't think that human nature is ready for that." And he said, "Well, how do you teach your kids how to drive without being willing to give them the keys to the car?" And I said, "That's a great point, but we are 3 years old. Like, emotionally, our maturity we are toddlers. And you do not give the keys to the car to the toddler. The first thing you work on with them is maybe object permanence or being able to walk. Like, there are things that are a little more important than giving them the keys to the car. And I get so frustrated when people will use will use this purity test as a way to abstain, as a way to, oh, I don't like the two-party system, so I'm going to bring it down. And I'm like, from the top, you're going to bring it down from the top. You're not going to support any local libertarian candidate or any local Green Party candidate. You're not going to go canvass for someone in your district. Instead, you just think that they should be president. That is preposterous. And that system happens nowhere. There is no country that has a multi party system, I mean, more than two, um, that has should I say, a poly system, that has a system of, multiple parties, where suddenly someone who never ran anything is at the top of one of the bigger parties. It never happens.
Yeah, and the way they talk about wanting to take money out of politics while simultaneously supporting millionaires like Jill Stein, Bernie Sanders. I mean, he's a rich white dude from Vermont at the end of the day who was a career politician for decades. And again, it goes back to that idea of what cognitive dissonance really is. And like, again, just kind of tricking yourself into the decisions that you're making. And it's like, well, you're not really going against big money. It requires money regardless to be able to become president or really win any election in this country. Even the people running for office that I fully support, who I feel like are very far left people, like Kat Abu, young, 26 years old, Palestinian, running for office in Illinois. She's trying to fundraise, she's trying to get money. And while it might not be big corporations, because people say not big corporate money, there's probably rich people donating. There's likely
Yeah.
somebody who probably is worth $1 million donating to her campaign. There's always some level of wealth involved, no matter how noble you might perceive the person to be and how noble they are, right? It's just the reality of the situation. And so, I've said this before that, like, rather than spending one season every 4 years trying to be contrarian rather than critical, you could actually work toward, I've suggested for years, a constitutional convention. I made a post saying the only way to get rid of the two-party system is to change the Electoral College, which is embedded in the Constitution, which requires a constitutional convention. And I had one of these far left white dudes say, "Oh, and who will run that? The duopoly," which that's not what the word duopoly means. That's an antitrust term, and I need everybody to
Yeah.
get that out of their vocabulary. It's two-party system. It's not. There's no such thing as duopoly in this context. Goes back to people not knowing how things work or what things mean. But anyway, he said, "Who would run this convention?" And I said, "Well, I would hope that you and other people with your ideology on the left would see this as an opportunity to lead." And I got no response. It was
Yeah.
crickets, because nobody wants to do the hard work of these particular things, the dry stuff. And so I've had folks instead, they get frustrated because, and I'm sure
Oh
you
no,
get this
we're
too.
losing you
Oh
again.
no. Oh no.
Ah,
Did I
we
come
lost.
back?
We got you back. We got you back.
Oh my God. Okay. Woo. Okay. But I'm sure you get this too, of having a very large platform, that people get frustrated because they want you to do what they want to do if they had your platform. And it's like, you can make your own, but I have been very clear from the jump that, especially as a Black woman, given where I sit in America and where we are now being 3 years old, I teach people how to work within the system, how to make those changes, the very not sexy stuff, the regulatory stuff, the administrative law stuff, all the legal stuff. That's what I do. And that is one path, just one path toward liberation. That is one path toward changing things. It doesn't mean it's invalid or that your path is invalid. It just means that's the way I'm going to move in the world and how I feel comfortable. And you're more than welcome to move in a different way that you see fit, unless it's accelerationism. And then I'm like, I need you to stop, because all you're doing is killing people. But if you wanted to go in, and try something different, I get you. Like, that's fine. But it's that frustration that I'm not doing what they think I should be doing. And so me getting 30,000 civil liberties complaints filed under the Privacy Act because of Doge was a very worthwhile thing to do, and helpful for lawsuits and helpful for this. But it wasn't sexy because I wasn't, I don't know, tying a bomb to myself and walking into a federal building or something, whatever the hell they think I should be doing. I'm like, I'm not doing that.
Yeah, please don't do that. That is
I'm
very
not doing
left-wing.
that. I'm
Yeah.
not doing that. I don't recommend anybody do that. As a matter of fact, I would really appreciate it if no one did that. But you see what I'm saying.
Yeah, and also don't martyr anyone, please. It's only gonna make it worse. But and I know we got to wrap up. You've been sitting in your car this whole time, being very very nice to still do this. Um, but it is exceedingly frustrating. One thing that I have seen since the inauguration is I will get messages probably 3 4 times a week from someone who has an idea for something and wants me to do it. And my reaction to that is anyone can have an idea, but you need to be passionate enough to at least try, build something, even if it's small. You want to talk about a certain thing, throw a podcast together and have no listeners, but show us that you can actually that you believe in this concept. If you want to put a charity together or build an organization, start with writing some bylaws. Understand that getting a 501c3 approved takes over a year. Like, there are so many things more than just like, wouldn't it be nice if someone else did this? None of us are someone else. We are ourselves. We can only do what we are able to do. And I'm happy to work together with people when they show me that they can actually put that work in. And I have, I have given my platform and my time to local organizations to amplify messages, absolutely. But what I haven't done is given my platform or time to someone who is like, it'd be nice if someone did this for me. Like, that's absolutely not someone I want to team up with. So wow, did you speak to something that I have been feeling a lot.
Yeah, I'm sorry that you also feel it, but I also feel seen because it's definitely a pressure. And I had somebody the assumptions that people make, and it was just the other day that this guy on Threads, again, a white dude, he was totally mad. I didn't even criticize Bernie in that video. I literally just said for the people who are acknowledging Bernie, but then saying he's the only one doing it. I would really appreciate if you look at what the black folks in leadership are doing, because
Yeah.
the phrase that I used was, "Is this the first time someone's doing that work, or the first time white people showed up in droves?" Because that's two different things.
Yeah.
So wasn't criticizing Bernie. Was actually said, "This is great. I'm glad he's doing it." Kicked off the video that way. He was so mad. He saw lawyer in my bio, and he fixed his face to tell me that I was stepping over black bodies to climb the corporate ladder.
Oh.
Mind you, I am a public servant. I'm capped at my grade. I'm fighting against Doge every day. I've been working for HHS for almost a decade. And I was like, prior to that, I worked in a medical legal partnership clinic where we did pro bono services for terminally ill, disabled, and sick children. And the only time I worked for a firm was to intern to help with a class action lawsuit to represent servers against really skeevy corporate restaurants. So the opposite of the corporate ladder. So I was like, this is an insane take. And I was just like, what's going on? And then people
Yeah.
tried to tell him, they were like, of all the people, they were like, she's never worked any kind of corporate ladder and make far less money than I could as a lawyer. And they were like, what are you doing? And he was like, oh, well, I didn't really look into her. I just, based on what she was saying. And I was
Yeah.
like, come on, man, come on. So that happens a lot where people just have these assumptions. And then it sucks to get it on the left, because then on the right, I'm getting all of the like racist people who are just like, you live on welfare and blah, 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 and say the most horribly like racist stuff just because they see a black woman. And I'm just like, okay, first, I'm a millionaire, corporate ladder, horrible person hurting other black people. And now I'm a welfare queen who has no money. Like, what whiplash I've had today.
I'm very impressed that you can do both at once. Not many people can multitask like that. And that goes back to the beginning of this chat when we were talking about you having, feed in multiple worlds. I think that that's, I can't even finish the sentence. Um, Elizabeth, this was absolutely a pleasure, and I'm glad we're able to do this. And I hope that I get to do a show with you at some point, because it's wonderful to to see the advocacy work that you're doing, and it sucks to say this, but a lot of this is stand up comedy's fault, because a lot of this happened because of these stupid bro podcasts and these baby comedians who will say anything that will get them attention. And because they're getting attention from that Kill Tony side and that Rogan sphere and the, all these broy podcasts, like that's what led to the outcome of this election. And so seeing people use stand up to try to take it back is wonderful. So and thanks for doing this. It was great to get to talk to you.
It was great, and I've just loved your comedy. My husband's probably watching at home, like she's not home yet, and he probably got the alert. He's like, "Oh my god, she's talking to Steve." He's probably really excited. And I just appreciate everything that you do, and for lending your platform to just let me come chat today. And yeah, I hope we get to perform together. If you're in DC, I just want to come say hey. So if you're, and when I'm in New York, I'll. Are you in New York or LA?
No, I live in Charlotte now.
Wait, oh my God, I totally had it backwards from your story. Okay, so you are like, you're not that far
I'm
still. And
Yeah.
one of my really good friends is down there. Okay, so next time I'm down there visiting my friend, I'm gonna have to like see if you got shows or something to like come by, because yeah.
Come hang in Charlotte. And actually, the guy who books the Comedy Loft in DC just opened a new club in Charlotte called Comedy Club at Duckworth's. And I've been hanging there a lot, and just doing kind of drop-in spots whenever I get the chance.
Yeah.
He brings in a lot of wonderful comedians. So come hang. Let me know when you're in town. Hopefully it's not when I'm on the road. But absolutely, come hang. There's it's a good scene down here.
Awesome. Well, same to you. Like, let me know if you're ever in the area. I'm around doing something always, whether yelling in front of the Supreme Court. With Walter Masterson, my God, he put me in one of his videos recently of confronting a pro-lifer. And I'm so pleased with the comments. His followers are so nice.
Yeah, well, it's been great to see Walter's social media blow up the way that it has because like I actually originally found out about him when he was at like 30,000 followers because his sister was a fan. And
Oh,
yeah, and so like she would come to shows and so then he showed up on my feed and so it's really nice to see that he has really exploded and he deserves it. So
also that
anyway,
he's like the nicest person, just like you.
yeah,
So it always makes me
thank you.
happy, like talking to people. I'm like, oh my God, they're as great as I think they are. So thank you again.
Excellent. Thank you. And thank you, everybody. And for anyone who is a fan of mine that does not subscribe to Elizabeth here, please do so. And, hope it happens the other way around as well. One of the things I love about Substack is how supportive people are and how easy collaborations are. And I'm going to be trying to do as many of these as possible. I know I'm doing Fred Wellman's show in a couple of weeks and, hopefully do some more of these. So thanks, everybody. Bye.